Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Friends of Israel's Jew and Gentile podcast. I am your host, Chris Katolka, and with me is none other than the Jewish sage himself, the one, the only, the Vanity Fair guy himself, Mr. Steve Herzig. How are you, sir?
Oh, good. I have a special guest.
Who's that?
My special guest is?
No.
Here he is. Here he is.
What is that? For our listeners, who is that?
That is a bird from Arizona that Alice fell in love with in our backyard every morning. They go by pairs. They're actually a quail, from the species of the quail. It can fly, but it chooses to walk. And notice its little feet here. Well, there's little feet. They go 100 miles an hour, and the thing goes real quick all over the place. Alice fell in love. So from Arizona, she said, you know what? I'm going to buy one of these babies.
That is so. Wait, that bird that you're holding has wings to fly, but it prefers to walk.
It prefers to walk. And we were staying with our colleague, Bruce and Janet Scott. And while we were there in their beautiful backyard, the backyards, Chris, no grass, stones, beautiful cactus, temperature 81 degrees. You're back there. It is fantastic. And what did we see? We saw, I'll tell you the bad news. Every day we saw a couple. They were a couple. They're monogamous. According to Bruce, at least. I haven't checked. They don't go for counseling, as far as I know. But the last day we were there in the morning, an owl swooped down,
grabbed
grabbed one.
That doesn't sound good.
And the other one was walking fast all over the place, trying to find its mate. But that owl flew away, and that was gone.
Steve, that is a very sad story.
It is a sad story, but it's God's creation. What are you going to do? There was a real comment. You should have seen this thing was going like this and looking around and trying to hide behind a cactus and see where its partner was, but it was all over.
Ay. All right, well, if you're wondering, if you're just tuning in and you're saying, why do they sound different? What's going on? Well, I'm in upstate New York. I'm an adjunct professor at Word of Life Bible Institute, and I'm teaching a bunch of first-year students, amazing first-year students, about the book of Matthew. Steve was just in Phoenix doing a PUC, a Prophecy Up Close conference with Bruce Scott, who is our director of ministry mobilization. And so just very thankful that even though we're not in the podcast room, we're together online and able to do our podcast this way. Hey, really quick too, Steve, we're going to be updating the podcast room soon. So if you watch online, if you watch on YouTube or whatever you watch on, whatever video service you watch on, we're getting a bit of a facelift in our podcast room. So that should be coming in the next few weeks.
Yeah, tell them why, Chris. What's happening? I'm being kicked out of my office.
I'm not kicking you out. I might have been packing your boxes, but I'm certainly not kicking you out.
I arrive in my office after gone a few days. I got boxes after boxes. And hey, that's progress. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord.
That's right. So we're taking Steve's office and we are turning it into the podcast room, which actually, Steve, for all the transitions that are happening in the next few weeks, I think it's kind of cool that your office is becoming the Jew and Gentile podcast room, because it's basically what we do. And now it's just your office again. You be in there all the time.
That's Zygazant. No, that'll be fine. It's fine with me. These things happen. You move on. Look at the poor quail. Lost its partner, walking all around the stones. Oh, the owl took my partner away, and that's it. What can I tell you?
All right. Well, you still have your partner. We're still here. We're still doing the Jew and Gentile podcast. Just FYI, if you're wondering what's going on, Steve Herzig is going to be a consultant for our department, North American Ministries. Steve, you've been serving in North American Ministries for more than 40 years with Friends of Israel. And so he's going to become a consultant and he's going to continue with the Jew and Gentile podcast. It's part of his consulting me in the podcast as the Jewish sage. And then also we're going to continue doing the ministry of North American ministries, mobilizing believers to get involved in their local Jewish community, to encourage Christians to see the value of Israel and the Jewish people, and to continue growing. And so that's some of the transitions that are happening in the next few weeks.
Well, Chris, last week we took a Vanity Fair article and we began to discuss it because it had to do with code and cosmos, and really a conversation between Dr. Francis Collins and a Gary Tan. Dr. Collins is the director of the Institute of Health and Human Genome Project. Oh, yeah, I could barely say it, but he's the doctor of it. And Gary Tam is the CEO of several tech startups. And they were discussing is it a contradiction to have AI and all the implications of it for all the things that it does, for how fast it is, it's so smart, versus God and the Bible and the traditional understanding we have as the person who knows all things. And what's interesting is the thesis of this article, a long article, some 18 pages long, is that their thesis is that all the pursuit of knowledge is good, but people ought to consider the foundation being God himself because of three basic questions the article started, and I want your comments. The first question is, what's the basis for morality? Why am I here? And what happens after I die? We took a test, Chris. I asked you to ask Siri. What did Siri say is, where did man come from?
Yeah, my Siri said that we all come from Africa, and then it sent me to a Wikipedia page or something like that. But then I asked ChatGPT the same question. I asked ChatGPT, AI, since we're talking about AI, where did man come from? And ChatGPT, Steve, I have to say, very kindly, okay, with great kindness, said, that's a great question. That's what it said. And one that's been asked for thousands of years. The answer depends on the lens you're using, biblical, scientific, or philosophical. Here's a quick breakdown of the main perspectives. Biblical creation, of course, that man comes from God, Genesis 1 and 2, and that we're made in his image. The scientific view, evolution. In modern science, the dominant theory is evolutionary biology, and that Homo sapiens Homo sapiens, us as humans, emerge around 300,000 years ago in Africa through natural selection and genetic mutation. And the last one, Steve, is philosophical view. Some philosophical approaches ask deep questions. So basically, the philosophical view is to ask more questions. What does it mean to be human? Is it?
I don't know. Ask me more questions.
That's right. Is consciousness or moral awareness what sets man apart? So we're talking about AI. We're looking at what's going on in Silicon Valley. And that Vanity Fair article, Steve, just to mention again, is called Christianity Was Borderline Illegal in Silicon Valley. Now it's the new religion. And so, we wanted to ask AI, artificial intelligence, is really driving the technological marketplace right now. So we wanted to ask AI, hey, where do we come from? And the reason why is because for many people, Steve, I think they can perceive AI to be God, in many ways. So we wanted to ask that question, and sure enough, it gave us the philosophical view, it gave us the scientific view, and the biblical view.
We go to wisdom literature. The Bible has wisdom literature, and that literature encompasses Proverbs, Ecclesiastes. Solomon was the wisest person around. And, I looked up several passages in the book of Proverbs, which very practical and very foundational. Some verses that our seven listeners would know. One comes from Proverbs 1 and verse 7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, So, Chris, and I think Collins and Tan would agree with that as they met in their Code and Cosmos meeting, having this conversation in the Silicon Valley. All these startup tech people came and they were talking about biblical things versus the AI. And Proverbs, Solomon says, hey, I learned my lesson well. Read the book of Ecclesiastes. The fear of the Lord is the foundation. The fear of the Lord's beginning of knowledge. And I think, Chris, here's the question you and I talked about before we came on. Would God be against AI? I don't think God would be against AI. I don't know if you do, but I think God would be very much for AI. He'd be for advancing our culture, advancing our knowledge. He already knows everything, but I think he takes joy in us learning about the environment that he's given to us. And as we unleash using his basic tools that he's given to us within the construct of our planet, I think it gives him great joy to see. What doesn't give him great joy is to see him abuse it, or as you and I talked about, this goes all the way back, not AI, but the concepts of what are happening goes all the way back to the book of Exodus with the image that the Jewish people made after they were redeemed by an incredible miracle.
That's
you want
right.
to expound upon that a little bit?
Yeah, it's really funny to me how what we do is we want to turn, what we can often do to ourselves in history as we look back, is I think we can look at ourselves in light of the technology that we build. I'm sure that Herod the Great did this when he constructed the most magnificent temple that even after 2,000 years, his architecture lives on today. If you ever get a chance to go to Israel with Steve and myself, what he was able to accomplish on land and sea is just absolutely phenomenal. And I'm sure one that he took great pride in. But, even when you fast forward to today, whenever we think technologically, oftentimes we can root our identity in this technology. We can root ourselves and say, hey, look, we're much more advanced than people were in the past. And so, you can begin to move away from God and to kind of create your own gods in that sense. And, as Steve was talking, I thought this is no different than that moment when the Israelites, when Moses goes up to Mount Sinai, and the Israelites are sitting there and they're waiting for Moses. He had not been gone all that long. It's not like he was gone a long, long time, but he's up there getting the 10 commandments, and the Israelites have a problem. And it says this in Exodus chapter 32. It says, when the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, I think he's gone for 40 days. Wasn't that long.
Well, that's a while when your leader's gone. And I don't know, 40 days to me, I'd be one of them saying, hey, what's Moses doing up there?
I'm sure you can ask that question, but at the same time, they've been in Egypt for 400 years. What's 40 days? So,
well, I don't think any of them looked at it that way. They just looked at their own lives. The people who had died before them, they're not thinking of them.
100%. So it says that they said, Moses has been gone for a while. And so they said, they gathered around Aaron and said, come, make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses, who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what happened to him. Okay, Steve, number one, I think the Bible is often very comedic in moments where this fella Moses, okay, you mean the guy who delivered us from the bondage of Egypt. We walked through on dry ground, he split the sea. There's Moses with his staff, the whole 9 yards. This guy, almost like Bupkis, the guy gets no credit.
How soon they forget. That's interesting, because in this Vanity Fair article, as you're talking about what took place in Exodus and our people who, hey, it didn't take long. By the way, we invented anxiety as well. So this is an anxiety complex.
Which must be connected to IBS or something like that. Right?
Absolutely. They're connected one with the other. But in the article, it says, according to Gary Tan, who was in this conversation, he said, people are so ready to make AGI their God, Chris. Isn't that? Yep. That's exactly what happened in Exodus. And then he said, what we're trying to do with this cosmos and code meeting, this meeting of bringing spirituality, of talking about God, about talking about creation and the Bible, what we're trying to do is to give them an alternative. Chris, this is dynamic in the tech world. This is something that, according to the article, Christianity was dead in the Silicon Valley, but evidently the Bible tells us that Christ said the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. Here's a great example of what seemingly seemed dead is now quite alive and vibrant.
Yeah, you know, when we think, the reason this conversation came up is because, like I was saying, you can begin to think in your technological world that you're kind of at the pinnacle, the tip of the spear of everything that's going on, and you can eventually begin to forget God. And then what happens is you fashion your own God. And so what's interesting is that Moses is gone for 40 days, and Moses was the motivator of getting people to see the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And what happens is he's gone for 40 days, and they lose focus. And so instead of looking for God or waiting patiently, they begin to fashion their own God. And that is what's interesting to me, because what's happening in a world, this whole thing is basically how Christianity was outlawed in Silicon Valley, Steve. But now what happens is when Christianity's outlawed and there's nobody pointing to God through Christ, and no one's pointing to God, you begin to create your own God. And that's exactly what they're talking about, is that people are looking at artificial intelligence, AI, as this relational being that we've developed. It's our creation. We made it. And yet now what happens? We start to worship it.
You know, Chris, a few articles ago, maybe about a year ago, I wrote an article about AI Jesus.
That's
and
right.
By the way, he's still on. I Googled him yesterday to see if he was still on. AI Jesus, when you get there, you see a image of what looks like our conception of a Western, at least, conception of Jesus, and he's moving slow. He's almost like not yuppie, a hippie version of Jesus, and you can ask him any kind of question, and he'll answer you in a very soothing voice. And so that's not what we're talking about, and that's not what this article is talking about. This article isn't talking about combining Jesus with AI. This article is talking about having a relationship with Christ, being spiritual, believing the Bible, and then using that as a foundation as you explore knowledge and as you produce companies and as you really advance in culture. And Chris, that battle's been going on a long time too. Is capitalism the way that God's happy? Is socialism the way God's happy? Should people be rich? Should they be poor? Those kind of talks and concerns have been going on for quite some time.
You know, when AI spit out the answers, I think it's amazing. I value that it answered the question biblically, scientifically, and philosophically. I value it, but to me, all of the issues that were dealt with by AI are actually issues that could be routed back to what the scriptures teach. So yes, we're made in the image of God. I'm 100%, as AI was telling me, it all depends on what angle you're coming at it or lens.
It's a diplomat. Oh, it depends.
Great question. It asked me. It said to me, I like that. I like it when
It's
AI.
like a psychologist, which says, "What do you think?"
But what's amazing to me is, number one, there are scientists today that are questioning. They're questioning whether or not social Darwinism, evolutionary theory, and I'm not even talking about Christians per se. They're questioning whether or not evolutionary theory as a science is something that should be something that we value, or that whether or not it is the ultimate form of creationism. So, when we talk about the way science is written out, like in the AI article, it can almost seem like it's saying this is settled science, where scientists are actually developing and asking the questions, well, is this really the right way? Where I would say, from a scientific perspective, God is the one who created all things and worked all things perfectly according to his knowledge and intellect. He's the designer of all things. So, of course, there's science connected to it. I don't believe in the evolutionary theory that they're talking about here, but that doesn't necessarily, just science is the whole point of science, is to question science. So to me, I think the scriptures give a perfect example of the way that God designed everything scientifically perfectly. We ground all of our laws of physics and all of our laws of thermodynamics and all the things that we use to develop flight and planes and boats and everything is designed based on how God created everything perfectly, scientifically. Then the other side is the philosophical, which wrestles with the issues of consciousness and with morality. The Bible is all about morality. The Bible is all about ethics. The Bible is all about consciousness. That's why we're made in the image of God. We are different. We are set apart. So it's interesting that it says, it depends on what lens you look at it through. I personally think the scriptures incorporate all of those various perspectives in a way that gives glory to God as the one who designed all things. And that's the reason why I think this is such an important conference, Code and Cosmos, because instead of worshiping the thing that we create, because it is amazing what they created, what we've created through AI, it's nothing to be worshiped. It should actually give glory to God, because we're made in his image and God's given us the intellect to make the most amazing things.
Well, you're helping me to segue into one of our news articles. We don't have to, it's not necessarily the news segment, but my wife sent me from the Daily Mail, the Daily Mail, her source of info every day, this article that declares I was a CIA agent and I know where the Ark of the Covenant, that guy Moses?
Yeah.
Remember that's what the Jewish people were saying. Hey, we don't know where the guy is. He's up there. He hasn't been back. That guy Moses, he's not coming back. Well, according to this, the CIA agent Major Ed Dams, who worked for the agency in the 1980s, was part of a secret army program that used individuals known as remote viewers. They could perceive information from distant objects and people or locations. So he's an AI guy on his own. He knows what's going on from far away, and he says he knows where the Ark of the Covenant is, Chris. What do you think of that?
I think it's amazing that I had the TV on in front of me here, the news, and they were highlighting this as we're talking. So the idea that they found, it's big news if you found the Ark of the Covenant.
If they found the Ark of the, here's what will happen. If they did, wouldn't it be amazing if the Ten Commandments were still in it? Wouldn't it be amazing if Aaron's rod was still budded? But even if it is, there are going to be people who won't believe. It's not going to make people believe. It's going to encourage believers, but people will. No matter what proof. Look, Jesus rose from the dead. We're going to be celebrating that in a couple of weeks. People saw it, and some of them rejected it. Oh, yeah, I see it, but I don't believe it. It's just the way it is.
Hey, can I say, too, really quick, I want to get back to this Ark of the Covenant, but many weeks ago, Steve, I found this video in light of what we've been talking about with code and cosmos. And what this man said, I have the video here. What this man said was absolutely amazing to me, because I don't know if I don't think he's a Christian, and I don't necessarily agree with what he's saying in the big picture, but more highlighting how, you can see what God did through what this man is saying philosophically. So I want to see if I can share this really quick, Steve, and play it, because I think it highlights the importance of this code and conference, this Code and Cosmos conference, because he talks so eloquently about creation that I think it lends to what God has done. He might be looking at it through a different lens, AI, but I just want you to hear this, and maybe we can have a quick talk about it. Here it is.
I think the answer is, so paradoxically, whilst we are definitely physically insignificant, the Earth is one planet around one star amongst 400 billion stars in one galaxy amongst 2 trillion galaxies in a small patch of the universe, right? So we're definitely small. You can't argue with that. We're just specks of dust. But if you think about what we are, so everybody, me and you, everybody, we're just collections of atoms, right? Some of them are as old as time, pretty much, and our bodies was made in stars, right? So we're all cooked over billions of years. And we're in this pattern that can think. You have a means by which the universe understands and explores itself, which is us. And that sounds unlikely when you put it like that, that you can have a few things that were cooked in the hearts of stars, you stick them together in a pattern, and suddenly it has some ideas and starts writing music. That happened here. And so the question then becomes, well, and how many other worlds did that happen? And that's where I think the value can come in, because there aren't any other worlds where this happened. This planet, notwithstanding its physical insignificance, is the only place where anything thinks, right, for millions of light years in every direction. And suddenly, therefore, you end up considering this planet as being the most valuable place in the local universe.
Now, Steve, I found that interesting, not because I believe we're cooked from stars, even though we come from the dirt. That Genesis talks about that, from dust to dust. I mean, we are the, made up of the elements. Our human flesh is made up of the elements of the earth. So in some way, he's right. We come from those elements. I don't believe we've been cooked over the billions of years. But what's amazing to me is that actually, from my lens of seeing it biblically, he is arguing exactly what I think this article is saying as well, which is, look, where else in the universe are people making music? Like, where else in the universe are people designing architecture? Where else in the universe are people writing poetry and thinking critically and asking tough questions and building and developing and all of these beautiful, making art, all of these amazing things? To me, that's the Imago Dei. That is the image of God in us. Why? Because he is the creator. He's developed all those things. And there's no other planet, what he said, for all that we know, nothing around for multi-millions of light years away that's doing that at all. And on this tiny little planet, God planted us. And I just think it shows the value. He shows the value of the planet. But for me, I think it shows the existence of a God that there's no other place like this. It's a wild thing to think about, actually.
Well, when I was in school, elementary school, I still remember my teacher telling us, if you took all the ingredients of the human body, we are worth 97 cents. And I don't know what inflation is, but just as that man was talking, if you just take all the elements that are in the human body, the chemistry of it, the value of the ingredients itself, at that time, which was 68 years ago, 67 years ago when I first heard it, we're worth 97 cents. So think about that. It brings more glory to God thinking of it that way. God used the ingredients that are virtually valueless, that are all over the earth. But when he breathed in the breath of life that only he could do, that 97 cents turns into a person who today, at least, is producing the building, the growing, the creating, the music giving that you just described. Whereas as far as we know, the center of the universe because no one else is doing it. And then to make sure we really understand of all that, the center of all that, Ezekiel 5:5, is Israel.
That's right. Jerusalem is the centerpiece of what God is doing to reach the world, so that instead of us constantly making little gods for ourselves from the things that we create, that actually we would look to Jerusalem as God orients our hearts to Jerusalem to see that he is the lawgiver, to see that he is the creator, and to see that he deserves all the glory, the majesty, and the praise. So, Steve, this was a great article, Steve.
Yeah, great article. And I like the way it segued into back to him for his glory. And we didn't even plan it that way.
That's right. Exactly. All right. Well, Steve, you did mention a moment ago about this article. You brought up the article about the Ark of the Covenant. And I do think it's so fascinating that this did come up. It is an exclusive piece. It was just released again on April 1st from the Daily Mail, as you had said. And the legend, like you had mentioned...
Not an April Fool's joke. It's not an April Fool's joke.
And you had mentioned Major Ed Dames, who worked for the agency in the 1980s, was part of a secret army program that used individuals known as remote viewers who claimed that they could perceive information about distant objects, people, or locations. Documents show that he was involved in the Stargate project, which ran from 1977 until 1995 and was deemed unsuccessful. And Major Dames told Daily Mail that he recently used his remote viewing skills to track down the missing Ark, claiming he located it inside the Cave of the Patriarchs. This is the religious site is located in Hebron in the West Bank. So it's interesting. Steve, of all the places for the Ark of the Covenant to be, that is not the place. I mean, that is the Temple Mount is a very sensitive location because, of course, the Dome of the Rock is on top of the Ark of the Covenant. Of course, the Jewish people are worshiping at the Western Wall, and some of them want to be on top of the Temple Mount that the Muslims have control of. It's just a sensitive location that could easily spark a regional war there. But equally is also the Machpelah. That's what this area is that he's talking about, the Machpelah. It's the family tomb of Abraham, where the patriarchs and the matriarchs are buried. Hebron is a Palestinian city. It's controlled by the Palestinian Authority. Within it, though, is a very small Jewish community that's actually controlled or protected by the Israel Defense Forces. And so all that so that the Jewish people can go worship at the Machpelah. And so apparently that's where the Ark of the Covenant has been all this time, is at the Machpelah. So who would have known? But I can only imagine, Steve, if they go digging around for it, it could create problems.
Well, I could tell you this, if any of them, they're very observant Jewish people, this community, they're very observant. If any of them are challenged physically, there's good news for them, Chris. The Shabbato is a scooter invented by a company that will allow the person to scoot around on Shabbat without breaking the Sabbath rules. Leave it to the Jewish people. The Shabbat, even the name, when I ran across the name Shabbato, I felt like saying, hey, I'm going to go to Starbucks. Give me a Shabbato and give me a double portion on the Shabbato. It sounds like a drink. Doesn't it sound like a drink?
It does. And in my mind, I just envision this world where a Jewish guy from Jerusalem is going to get on a Shabbato on Saturday and drive down to Hebron to go look for the Ark of the Covenant, but he's not breaking a single rule because he's not even driving that thing. The electric is always on. So
that's right. The Times of Israel provided this article, the title, The Shabbato, Mobility Meets Halakha, which is the rabbinic rule. And so they got a picture of a grandfather with his two grandkids in front of him. He's sitting on this mobile unit. They're walking for a Shabbat, but he gets to ride on his Shabbato without breaking the law, because attached to this scooter, and it could come off and you could put it on, is a gizmo that keeps the scooter on and so it doesn't break the electrical code, the electrical thing that's going on. So he's not turning anything on during Shabbat. He's not turning it off. It's on all the time. You get on it, you turn your handle, it's on already, and off you go. You haven't broken any rabbinical laws. Shabbato. It's just a great name.
Well, they also have a Shabbato elevator for when you're in Israel and you have to go up to your hotel room. And I always love the Orthodox Jews when they see us coming and it's a Friday night into Saturday and we're looking to get on an elevator and they'll say, no, you don't want to get on this one. And it's not because they want to separate from us or whatever. It's because this is the Shabbat elevator. It stops at every floor. It gives a moment for everybody to get on. That way we don't have to press any buttons. So if you want to wait with us on our ride up to the 15th floor, sei gesund. But if you want to get there quicker, you probably want to take another elevator because this Shabbato elevator is stopping at every floor.
Well, Chris, on our tours to Israel, inevitably, people will come down for Shabbat meal after the sun comes down. One of our people on our tour and say, oh, brother, I got on the wrong elevator. What is going on? It stopped at every place because someone on our trip probably forgot to tell them about the elevator and they got to experience. But everybody should experience that, don't you think?
You got to go through a Shabbato elevator. Steve, I want to share another news article that came our way. It's about archaeologists in Israel that have uncovered proof of an ancient biblical battle at the Armageddon site. Exceptionally phenomenal, they write. This is, this is Fox News that wrote this. Number one, I always like headlines, Steve. You got to capture people's attention in order, it's, what do they call that? Clickbait. You got to click on it, okay? Archaeologists uncover proof of an ancient biblical battle at Armageddon. Now, none of that is wrong, but the way they write it makes you click. So, Armageddon, which we know is the Battle of Armageddon from the book of Revelation in Revelation 16, is actually talking about a specific location, which is two Hebrew words that are mashed together to make Armageddon, called Har Megiddo, the mountain of Megiddo. And Megiddo is a place in Israel. And so Megiddo actually has been the center of battles for centuries, for millennia. And so archaeologists are always digging around there. And they uncovered pottery shards that actually date back to a battle at Armageddon that actually happened during the time of Josiah. And so these particular fragments that they found actually show that Egyptians were present at Megiddo during that time. It says that the findings consist of significant quantities of Egyptian-produced broken vessels dating back to the late 7th century BC, close to when the Battle of Megiddo between Pharaoh Necho, if you remember that, and Josiah was fought, King Josiah. Instead of fragments being proof of trade relationships, Kleinman, who's the archaeologist, believes that they were brought in by Egyptian troops rather than being imported into the territory. The expert cited the crude production techniques, functional mixture, and lack of similar evidence of nearby settlements as a reason why they believe artifacts were brought in by the army. The exposure of so many Egyptian vessels, including fragments of serving bowls, cooking pots, and storage jars, is an exceptional phenomenon. We therefore understand it as representing Egyptians who settled at Megiddo, Armageddon, in the late 7th century, maybe as part of an army force that arrived at the site following the collapse of the Assyrian Empire. So, archaeological proof showing that at the time of Josiah's death, when the biblical account says Josiah, the king of Judah, was killed by Pharaoh Necho in 2 Kings, that ultimately we have archaeological evidence of Egyptians being there. And I love archaeology, Steve. It's amazing because I would have missed it completely. But here they're looking at the substance of the pottery and they're saying, well, this wasn't made here. These techniques, this actual dirt was imported in from Egypt, which means this would have been like with a caravan of troops that would have brought that stuff up. to Megiddo, all this interesting stuff that I would have been like, what's this? Move along, with just some pottery shards. But they did the scientific evidence to look at the fact that this comes from a certain time period and also was probably imported in, which means they were fighting. So again, interesting things there.
Well, they also said that it was interesting. There were some Grecian pottery mixed in, and they know during this period that there were Greek mercenaries who teamed up with whoever was fighting to get their share of the loot, so to speak. And they found Grecian pottery mixed amongst the Egyptians, same time period, but different people. So they're putting this all together. Archaeologists, I'm glad we have them. I don't know how you can learn that much from dirt, but they teach us, and there you have it.
I learned that much from dirt. I always appreciate, you can always find, I believe an archaeologist has to have a certain personality. Like Bruce Scott, our colleague at Friends of Israel, if, he probably could have a dream job, it would be to be an archaeologist, because he's particular, he's detailed, he's all of, I want the action. I want to find the Ark of the Covenant. If I can't find that, everything else is bupkis, You
got to go to Hebron. You got to go to Hebron now.
I'm not going to Megiddo. I'm going to Hebron. But when it comes to real detailed archaeology, finding even the smallest pottery shards and the inscriptions and the coins, like that stuff, I'll let the archaeologists manage that. I appreciate going through all their hard work when we go to Israel.
Well, speaking of archaeology and dead Egyptian soldiers and Grecian soldiers, we get the Jerusalem Post. There was a man in Toronto, Chris, and the headline from the Jerusalem Post is, "I'm going to plant a bomb in every synagogue in Toronto." Oh, thank you for the gift here. A bomb in every... this is what people live for, to kill Jews. It's so remarkable to me. And it's newsworthy. Certainly it's newsworthy, but they got to find this guy. And
I know, ASAP.
As soon as possible.
Canada has like the U.S. and the rest of the world, a rising anti-Semitism as a result of October 7th. So continue to pray for Israel. But the reality, though, too, Steve, on the other end of things, you sent me an article, and we'll wrap up with this article, is that an Israeli firm claims a breakthrough age-reversing drug that it can extend your life by 30%. That's amazing.
What's more amazing is if this is done by Breitbart. Chris, I don't know if you have your phone opened up to the article, but there's two people that are Alice and my age jumping up in the air. This is the funniest. I guess that's the 30%. Look at how high they're jumping.
Oh, they're jumping. I would love to see Alice jumping that high with you.
Their mouths are open, almost as wide as they are long, and they are so happy, holding hands about 15 feet in the air. I broke my hip trying to do something like this. I don't know if
you would have been on this drug, you might have made it over the gas.
I might have made it over the gas hose. Israeli biotech firm claims breakthrough. Age-reversing drug, 30%. You're going to live longer and better. We're
saying it's in human trials right now, and that it could extend your lifespan by up to 30% by targeting the age-regulating protein, the SIRT6, which the company said would also improve brain function, organ health, and overall vitality. You think?
SIRT what? SIRT...
The SIRT6, SIRT dash the number 6.
-6. Hey, I got to wake up tomorrow and tell Alice, you know what I'm missing? The SIRT6.
Well,
give me more of that.
Everybody's SIRTs are going crazy right now.
They're going crazy.
And it's Professor Chaim Cohen, Steve. That's
of course. What did you expect?
Exactly this. Professor Chaim Cohen, the company's chief scientist and head of the Sagul Institute for Longevity Research, said the compound has already restored CERT 6 levels in test animals to those seen in young specimens, dramatically extending both lifespan and quality of life.
That's what we need, Chris. Rats to live longer. That's great.
Yeah, how do they sit there and watch a rat like live?
I don't know. But hey, I hope, anything, you know what that means for the gospel? That means unsaved people will live longer, better chance of hearing the gospel and getting saved. That's the way we look at it.
Preach it, brother. All right, Steve, Yiddish word of the day, given all the things that we've been talking about and all the cosmos and code concert, the longevity drug, all these this guy having a vision of the Ark of the Covenant and that.
What
do you got for us for the Yiddish word, Steve?
I looked up the word entrepreneur. Look, we got a guy who's inventing 30% living longer. We got a scooter that can now motor without breaking the Sabbath rules. So Yazamim is entrepreneur, coming from the Hebrew word yazam, which means, Chris, I told you, we invented all these things. We have that entrepreneurial spirit. In Hebrew, it's yazam. In Yiddish, it's yazami. And so sei gesund on the yazmai.
And I'm just going to say there's one more word that should be coupled with that, and that's just plain old chutzpah. That's what sets the Jewish people apart, is a little level of chutzpah attached to that entrepreneurial spirit. Well, hey, everybody, thanks so much for being a part of the Jew and Gentile podcast, the Friends of Israel's Jew and Gentile podcast. Hey, listen, don't forget to join us on April 10th. That's Thursday night, 7:30. We're going to have a survivor's story. That's with George Rishfeld. He's a Holocaust survivor. Great opportunity for you to hear his testimony on the Holocaust and to be a part of a great fellowship of FOI Equip listeners and participants. You can become an equipper by going to foiequip.org, and there you can register as well. Hey, Steve, don't forget, free stickers,
424.
1948. Don't forget to get your free stickers. And everybody, thank you so much for being a part of the Friends of Israel's Jew and Gentile podcast, and we'll see you next week.